good afternoon. We'd like to start off by saying thank you to Catherine and A3 Québec for including us in this webinar series, and thank you all for joining us today. I'd also like to thank our moderator, Michelle Bouffard. Thank you, Michelle. And 4 of our New Zealand winery principals, Erica Crawford of Lovelock, Karen Titular of Villa Maria, Alice Rule of 362, and Chris Archer of Archer McRae Beverages, who will be leading us through an interactive discussion around the impact New Zealand wineries are making to support our future generations. Sustainable Wine Growing New Zealand is widely recognized as a world-leading sustainability program, and it was one of the first to be established in the international wine industry in 1997. Today, 98% of New Zealand's vineyard producing area is sustainable wine growing certified, with 7% also operating under recognized certified organic programs. I would like to hand it over now to Michelle and our winery participants to discuss what is next for the New Zealand wine industry. Michelle?
Thank you so much, Melissa. I would like to thank the A3 Québec for this opportunity, and also thank you so much, Melissa and Andrea, and to all of you that are here this morning to join the discussion. As you all know, I founded a conference 4 years ago called Tasting Climate Change that takes place in Montreal, so you all know how dear to my heart this topic is. So I did so much research on what New Zealand is doing. I just want to touch quickly on what Melissa said. She said 98% of it's 98% of the wine industry is certified sustainable. Sustainable, sometimes it's a word that we use easily, and sometimes in the wine industry we kind of roll our eyes with that term because it means something. There's so many different body of regulation. Sometimes are wide, sometimes are more strict. I have to say, when I went to New Zealand in 2007 and I was there for an entire month, to me, the word sustainable made sense. I could feel that the producers, it was a way of life. It was not something that was a marketing tool. It was truly, they were looking at all of the aspects, the environment, the social, and the economics. And it's become a model for me after that to understand what sustainability means. And I think New Zealand has always been looked at one of the leaders in the world in terms of sustainability. And with that, we decided to go a step further today with this conversation because in May, the Prime Minister of New Zealand announced that the country is committed to be carbon zero by 2050. So, as you can imagine, that is a big step forward. It is designed to progress with the global effort under the Paris Exchange Work Program that she put together to present to the New Zealand wine growers that talk about what they can help for the wine industry to reach that goal by 2050. And she said to me, "I'm sending this document, but it's a draft, you cannot share it. And I'm waiting for the approval any day." So Monday morning, I woke up and I had an email from her saying it's just got approved. So that's very exciting because it just happened a few days ago. So before we launch into the discussion, I just want to share a few things that was put forward to New Zealand wine growers to reach that goal and to help the industry to reach that goal. So first of all, the climate change working group. So it's about having a board to listen to the need of the wine industry, but also to communicate effectively to wine producers so that they can work together towards that goal. When you talk about climate change, there's always 2 big things, right? There's adaptation. So what can a producer do today to adapt with the conditions? We all know that climate change is bringing a lot of different challenges, whether it's drought, whether it's more water. So they are working with the BRI, which is the Brigado Research Institute, to look at ways to adapt. So how can we adapt now? What can be done in the winery and in the vineyards? There are also going to be some research projects. One of them is the emission contributions. We need to look at the size and nature of the emission. The other thing is to track, how can we track the carbon emission from the vineyard to the winery? And that's not easy. So we need to put things in place so that how we can reduce while you can reduce when you know where it's coming from. So they're going to put together ways to track the carbon emissions and look at where it's coming the most from. And once you know that, it's easier to prioritize, because we'll see, and we'll talk about that, the carbon emissions sometimes come from certain areas. So you really need to tackle these places first if you want to get into target. Really big goal also is they want the members to become, and someone from New Zealand can correct me on my pronunciation, the toitu carbon reduce.
Toitu, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so it's basically an accreditation association. So as a winery, you will track all your carbon emission and you will be accredited. And that's great because you get a logo that you put on your label, and that's extremely useful for consumer knowing that this winery is actually carbon zero. And finally, they are planning on joining the Climate Leaders Coalition, which is an association that is not just for the wine industry, but all businesses in New Zealand, that they can look all together how to work towards that goal. So just a little introduction to kind of tell you what's been happening in New Zealand. And again, I don't know any wine industry in the world who's committed to be carbon neutral by 2050. So again, New Zealand is ahead of the game. So to start the discussion, I would like to maybe go to each of you one by one, because you're all doing something very different that are very complementary. And I think we can all learn from each other in terms of the steps you've been doing. And I would like to start with Erica Crawford from Loverblock. Thank you so much, Erica, for being here this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. You're very well known in the wine industry, of course. Lots of respect for the work you've been doing. And we had a really interesting discussion, you and I together, because of course you are you're sustainable, so you're accredited, you're sustainable, but also you are organic. So there's some blocks that are organic. The first question I'd like to ask you is, with the climate change right now, and you know, you're seeing different patterns probably in the weather in New Zealand that you haven't seen before. How do you feel that being sustainable and organic can help you to adapt to adapt to climate change?
I think firstly, and this is just speaking from observation, I'm not backing this by, I can do it, but I just want to tell you what we've observed in the last 5 years in Marlborough, for instance. You know, the cyclones come over the Pacific, and ordinarily they would track over the north, way over the North Island, and North Island would get sort of the dredge, you know, that rain that just comes down for 2 or 3 days. And that usually happens about January-ish, February-ish. What we've seen in the last 5 years, that the cyclones are coming down lower. So they're coming over the lower part of the North Island and have also hit the top part of the South Island. So obviously that's a big problem for us, because the biggest part of our wine growing area is Marlborough. It also takes in, of course, the lower part, the North Island, and parts like Hawke's Bay. So that's one thing we've definitely observed. You know, in 2017, we had 2 cyclones passing through. In 2018, it rained a hell of a lot. 19 and 20 were back to normal, beautiful vintages, but we definitely are seeing climate change. And I also looked at the modeling last night going forward. You know, every single wine region is projected to have a temperature increase of at least 1.5 degrees, which is considerable. But another worrying thing is our hot days will increase, and it's going to stay warmer for longer, so into April. And you'll have rain days into April, which also, of course, means that April is when we usually harvest. So we're going to run into trouble. And I guess that's one of the reasons why we're here today. What I've observed during those 2 years, and also 14, with the organic blocks, is that they generally fare better in those muggy, warm, rainy weathers, because the cover crop absorbs the first part of the rain coming in. So that's one thing. The canopy is more open. That's the second thing. It less prone to disease under those circumstances too, because the canopy is is more open. And now we have a big problem with powdery mildew, so it also negates some of those issues. So we've seen in the organic blocks that they definitely fare better in those difficult years, and in the good years they fare as expected. So it's just been really. I think Villa probably will agree with that statement. I don't know what you find at Villa Maria.
Absolutely. We are also finding that the organic blocks are much more resilient to climate change, and for different reasons as well, and sometimes perhaps the grape, the skins on the grapes and so on as well. So I totally agree with what you're saying, Erica.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you're saying that, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around it. Sometimes people say, well, with more rain in some areas, you have more fungal diseases. It means more spraying. It means also more passing in the vines. And in some areas, it's not electric, right? So it's interesting you're saying that, Erica and Karen, that they fare better. So you actually don't need to spray necessarily more.
I think, the major issue that we're dealing with in the vineyard is powdery mildew, and we apply a contact, sulfur, so it sits on the surface, so it's not systemic. So, not necessarily because of the rain, just because of the disease, you do have to go on that 7 to 10 day cycle for a while, up to certain times in the disease cycle. Yeah.
I think another thing quickly to note is the changes of these temperatures with phenological ripeness with sugar ripeness speeds. We've also noticed like shrinking like our picking windows are being reduced, and that's a worldwide phenomenon. So there's so many things. Sort of it's compounding the intensity of our this climate changes in compounding the pressure of making wine.
Yeah. So we used to have a 21-day window to pick the grapes in Marlborough, and that's now shrunk to 14 days, which means that your winery setups had to change completely, because more grapes come at once. So you have to have a bigger front end, and so that's a lot of capital investment. Chris is quite right. It's been quite interesting.
We're also seeing, the harvest coming in earlier as well. So that's about shifting timetables.
Yeah.
Dangerously close to Christmas.
This is a question for all of you, and that's linked to what you guys were talking about. Are you seeing any other major changes with climate change in New Zealand? What are the most challenging things you're seeing in terms of the climate change right now?
I would probably say, I'm interested in the other thoughts. I'd probably say the shift in rainfall patterns. And it's supposedly we're getting the same rainfall, although I think in some years, like this year, I wouldn't necessarily say so, but the shift in rainfall patterns, and when the rain does come, it's very intense and very heavy, and the cyclones, as Erica referred to, but then the very, very long dry periods. So yeah, I'm interested to hear what the others say on that one.
I think also the change in wine styles that will come as a result of the weather that we have to deal with season to season. So last year, or last vintage in Marlborough, we had a massive drought. The Waido River was closed off. We could not draw or irrigate from them. And just tasting my 2019 Sauvignon, we've lost a lot of acids. Our Chardonnay, the fruit was so clean that we had no solids. Normally we would do lees stirring, but the fruit was the juice was so clear that we didn't have solids to work with. In Hawke's Bay, again this year, we're 2 weeks early from with harvest. And again, I think there will be some major shifts in wine styles, for the better or worse. But yeah, as winemakers, I think we're going to have to start looking at the fruit and what we have to work with.
And what do you see as when you're talking about Alice, what do you see in terms of how to adapt to that when you're seeing the wine style change? Is it a matter of viticulture? Is it a matter of clone? Is it a matter of canopy management? What can you do to adapt to that?
I think that we just need to start looking at different areas of land and saying, well, how sustainable is this? You know, I've grown some grapes on some stones. I can't irrigate anymore because, you know, it's not sustainable, or they've closed off the riverways. Perhaps other regions or sub-regions will perhaps be more favourable, and with that will bring more diversity and change of wine styles to the market. I don't know, everything is a gamble, because again, 2020, the Marlborough vintage was incredible. Like the acids, we've got those back, the vines are so much healthier. I've got solids in my Chardonnay again, and yeah, so who knows? I think that, but as winemakers, we're going to have to start recalibrating ourselves, as perhaps the wine styles that we once were making may not be relied upon year upon year.
I think another thing that's quite interesting is that what we're seeing being planted in Central Otago, you know, it's cold and it's hot, and so we've just put in 2.5 hectares of Syrah, or putting it in this winter just to see how it goes, you know, because you never know what's going to happen in 5, 20, 30 years' time. And the other thing that Alice is talking about, you know, also, and I suppose it's a result of disease pressure as well, powdery mildew, is our canopies are going to have to be a lot more open, and that will take some of the zippy greenness away out the Sauvignon Blanc. You know, whether it's good or bad, I don't know. It's up to people's personal palates, but I've seen that happening slowly but surely.
There's also potentially opportunities, I guess, as you said, with planting Syrah in Central Otago. But I think within the Hawke's Bay, you know, we're in the position that we might be able to really compete truly with some of the great Australian reds. And so it's that while there are challenges, I think there are also a lot of opportunities out there. And I know that our winemakers and viticulturists are looking at it from that perspective. Rootstocks as well, trialling different rootstocks that are more resilient is the type of thing that we're looking at. Canopy management, as Erica said, trialling different varieties. So it could actually be an opportunity to bring in some new varieties for consumers to try, such as Albarino.
I think the wine industry is an incredibly adaptive change. Like we handle so many complexities of weather and styles and all the things that are thrown up at us. I guess this whole movement is about just slowing everything down, trying to stop these extremes from occurring, so that, you know, because, you know, as we get more and more extremes, then we're going to have less ability to cope with them. So it's but this, like, this whole change, and that's the wine industry. It's such a moving animal, which is part of its charm.
Absolutely.
Karen, I would like to continue with you, and I'll come back to you later, Erica. But Karen, you are the head of sustainability for Villa Maria. Villa Maria is such a everyone respects you in the industry, especially around what you've done towards climate change. I think you were one of the first to really pay attention to tracking your carbon emission. It's been 10 years now, and I think you've reduced so far 36%. Is that correct? Since
36% per bottle of wine, because the winery has grown significantly in that 10 years. But yes, and we've got a goal to reduce it by 50% per bottle of wine by 2025. So we're still well and truly on the journey. Which is amazing. Can you maybe, if you go on the website of Villa Maria, you talk about the main pillars towards mitigation towards climate change, because now we just talked about adaptation, now we'll talk about mitigation, which is different. Can you talk a little bit about, because the carbon emission come from different places, with your experience, if someone wants to start and say, okay, I am sustainable, I am organic, I am adapting, but now the next step is to look at the mitigation. Where do you start, and where do the carbon emission comes the most from? Yeah, it's interesting. We've been talking with a lot of people. So in the last year, I would say I've had so many approaches from different organisations, from very big ones and to smaller ones who are saying, we want to start on this journey, but we just don't know where to start. And it can be a bit intimidating. if I reflect on our journey a little bit, and well, that's what I do when people come to talk to me, reflect on our journey and our learning from our journey. I think that the biggest thing to start with is scope and understanding what is it that you want to measure and understand. And there are different ways of doing this. And the Toitu, who you mentioned before, we've been working with them for 10 years. They're fantastic and they're very helpful in working with organisations to help them define it. The decision we made on scope, and this is working with Toitu, so we are certified to the international standards ISO 14064, and that's quite a critical part of the journey, because it gives you that robustness and those experts to work with on things such as scope. When we decided to do this 10 years ago, we actually expanded the scope of what we measure to our packaging, which we didn't have to. So we could have actually just measured our operations directly. But looking at the data now and understanding that, I think that was absolutely the right decision, because packaging actually makes up the majority of our carbon emissions. So if we hadn't done that, it wouldn't have been a genuine reflection of the carbon emissions that involved in the production of our product when it goes to consumers. So including packaging for us was really important. But what it does mean is that we're going out there with perhaps a larger footprint than a company that might go out there and say, we're not going to include packaging because we don't have to, but we're going to say that we're carbon neutral, we're going to offset, but they're actually offsetting a much smaller footprint. So we're very much focused on reduction, and at some stage we might focus on offsetting, but at the moment we're still focused very much on the reduction side of things, and that understanding our wider scope. Once you've got your scope, then it's about understanding the data, and I think this is where people can get bogged down, is how do we collect all that data?
Yes.
And it's the biggest thing is to reach out to your suppliers, because the majority of our data comes from our suppliers, and work with your supply chain. And I think it's a really good opportunity. So I think the other thing is we've got to be kind to ourselves. We don't have to get it perfect straight away. You know, you just start the journey. Every step on the journey is a step in the right direction. I think people get scared, they get worried that if they put themselves out there, that they're looking at their carbon footprint, then people will start to pick holes in what they're doing. But I think the thing is, you've just got to be open and upfront and say, we're on the journey, we're starting the journey, we haven't got it perfect yet, but we're trying. And when it comes to data, it's about going out to the suppliers and say, hey, this is what we want to collect. And when you start that discussion with your suppliers, what you're actually doing is starting a very values-based discussion with your suppliers and saying, this is our goal, and we want to work with you on this. And what we have found is that a lot of the initiatives that have been taken within Villa Maria to reduce our carbon emissions have been real partnership initiatives with suppliers, and reducing the producing the lightweight bottle that we now provide our wines in is a really good example of that. So going out to our suppliers and say, hey, carbon emissions is really important to us, we want to reduce them, and actually starting that discussion. So with the data, having that discussion with your suppliers is really important. The journey where we're on, I guess, is that I don't think we've used that data as well as we could in terms of managing our business. So I think the value of it has only recently been recognised. And that data is then fantastic for understanding how your business operates, understanding how your business can become more efficient. And I think someone referred earlier to actually about making, it's got to be good business decisions. I think you referred to it, Michelle, in terms of sustainability. It's good for the environment, it's about what's good for the community, but it's also got to be good for the business.
Yes.
And actually collecting that data and understanding it and using it for decision making is critical. So we now have in all our any capital expenditure that people request across our business, whether it's a wineries manager or a viticulture manager, they have to justify that capital expenditure in terms of the carbon emissions impact. And we now, I think what we need to do is bring that data we have, and we have this goldmine of data from 10 years that we can then use to understand the impact of the decisions we make. So that's where we're at on that journey. I think the other learning is, so just get started, start the discussions with the suppliers, get the data in. Certification and a partner with the likes of Toitu is essential. I think it's important for our consumers to feel confident in what we're doing, but it's really important for our own journey in terms of being challenged by experts and being, it puts us on a continuous improvement journey. The last thing I would say is set a goal, set a target, and don't be scared of it. I think people, you know, worry that if they set a target, but what if we don't make it, then we look like we're failing. But I think it's just about being open and honest and transparent and giving it a go. And having that goal in there means, again, it's about framing that decision making. Because across our business, our managers know that every decision they make needs to be a decision that moves towards that target. And what I've observed is that while you can have really big things that might move the dial quite considerably, which I would say the big I in innovation, and that for us might be if we could bring electric tractors into our vineyards or hydrogen-based tractors, that might really move the dial. But often actually making progress is about the lots of small steps. So making sure our tractors are as fuel efficient as they possibly can. And that's how we've made big progress in the last 10 years.
Are you finding that other people in the industry in New Zealand are coming to you for some advices? And
absolutely.
They don't know where, and they're looking and say, can you help me?
Absolutely, they are. And I always value those conversations because I always come away learning something from those conversations as well. And I think when it comes down to it, I mean, I guess some companies might have the view that it is a competitive advantage to say that we're more sustainable, and to a certain extent it can be, but actually we're all in this together, you know, and we all need to make progress together. And I think the wine industry in New Zealand is a fantastic example of a really collaborative industry that like to work together and help each other, particularly around that sustainability front. And I think and we've all got something to learn from each other, so I value those approaches just as much as the people tell me that they value learning from our experience.
I have to say it's one of the things that really surprised me when I went to New Zealand. I get a chance to travel in a lot of places, and it's not always that I find people working together, especially the small wineries and the bigger winery. And that's one of the things that really I was astonished how it is a real community in New Zealand, and people do seem to work together from the small to exchange research and ideas. And I think it's fantastic. I think it's the way to the future if you all want to work towards that goal together.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Karen. Chris Archer, so we're talking about you have to start somewhere, and I know that for you packaging was a big thing, very innovative, where you are putting your wine in small formats in cans. So we had a lot of discussions about, I was getting really excited because you could there was so much to talk about in terms of why you chose to go to cans, the material itself. So can you maybe share with us what made you go to cans specifically, and why do you think it's better than glass, let's say?
Oh, well, I guess from the start, like, I've been in the traditional industry for over 30 years. And so about 10 years ago, I kind of was having a look at all the other beverage sectors, which is kind of quite different for the wine industry. We tend to be quite focused on our traditional craft, and we don't kind of look around too much. And I felt that the wine industry was losing an opportunity in single format. And so our whole company was set up to take wine into single format, which it's traditionally done very poorly. And exactly what Karen said prior, that the failing of single format for the wine industry has been economics, effectively. To try to run small format bottles, no one wants to do it because we're using existing infrastructure, the line runs slower, it just doesn't work. Dry goods are more expensive, everything's more expensive, and so at the end of the day it doesn't work. And so we pushed initially down into that small format bottle for around about 4 or 5 years, really focusing in, because we saw a real sort of growth in that market, and especially when you look at the soft drinks, RTDs and beer sectors. And the wine industry was missing out of that opportunity. It was also missing out on customers that kind of, want to drink in that format but can't. And so we eventually were led to cans for more economic reasons, to make it all work because of the line speeds and the dry goods. But then I really was quite shocked when we started doing the due diligence of the packaging, the lightweight, and also with canning as well. You know, the industry's been working in the world for about 20 years putting wine in cans, and the original ones were not very good. As possibly, you know, when we as winemakers we first put into glass, we probably just didn't do a very good job of that either. But over the last 20 years, we've kind of ironed out the can manufacturing for wine, the technology of getting the product in there properly, and so that now cans can deliver the same as effectively a screw cap glass bottle, if everything's done right and the cans are made well. And so that whole quality issue of like for like, it's a container at the end of the day. And we did do some due diligence on other mediums and formats. We looked at plastic, but that just raised the issues of, you know, the problems of packaging again. And the more that plastic works for wine, the less recyclable it is. So it's a real catch-22 in that. And whereas what shocked me was, you know, the impression of aluminium in the beginning kind of has a negative feeling for the consumer for older generations. But as the younger generations have come through, especially with the craft beer movement and the technology with all soft drinks around the world, there is now consumer comfort in that format, which is fantastic. And then finally, which is what we're all here about, is sustainability. And I was quite shocked, actually, of how good aluminium is as a format for packaging. And so, you know, you're digging smaller holes as a resource than looking at glass. The power carbon footprint required to make volume for volume in glass, you're actually about 20% ahead in making cans versus glass from raw material. And then the real knockout punch is really in that in that recycling window. Once aluminium's made, you only need 5% of the power to reconstitute it. So you literally, you know, the issue with glass, it's a fantastic material, but it's heavy and it takes it has a high melting temperature. And of course, you know, as Karen was saying, packaging is. You look at wine, we are the most efficient alcohol conversion of sugar. Our plants use the smallest footprint of water. We grow in the most arid areas of agriculture. So as an industry, and the DNA of our industry is to be improving DNA. We're an industry that opens the kimono and lets consumers come into our factories. Like no other industry does that, but the wine industry, because we are, you know, we're all about being open and transparent. And I think that packaging at the moment, cans can really decrease our carbon footprint massively. And just to give you an idea of like a recycled can, you're basically talking like a 700 gram bottle is equivalent to about 118 recycled cans. We're not talking like 2% gain or 5% gain. It is a massive gain. And then on top of that, the weight, you're basically talking, shipping costs are probably the most, people talk about wine going all around the world. That's actually quite a small component of the fuel usage of wine. It is actually those last kilometres going to the restaurants and to the supermarkets where the damage is done. And you're looking at basically 40% saving in fuel costs of transporting wine around the world. Now, as an industry, I mean, they're huge numbers. So I see cans have a place, just as cans have a place in soft drinks and spirits and beers. I can never imagine a Romani Conti in a can, but I can really see that, if that one decision of changing a material format has massive impact and reduction to get within the Paris aims for the future.
And how have you found the market acceptance from because I believe you started in 2011?
Yep, 11, and we put our first cans down in January of 2017.
Yeah, so you've had a few years under your belt now. How are you finding the market acceptance from the moment you started till now?
Well, I mean, we've always been the innovator. You know, it's a tough road to hoe, changing culture. I mean, culture is a massive undertaking. I mean, effectively, America has led the way in the can culture, and I guess that's really courtesy of the can craft market, the beer market in California, and then the Californian winemakers started, and it really started that culture of environmental, sustainable, small, lightweight, and then Canada has followed. Australia started about a year and a half ago with Woolworths launched the category. And then New Zealand soon followed. So it's new. Effectively, the early adopters get it straight away. Like they will try. They don't have fear. It's the conservative population that, you know, instantly, you know, it's a hard one for them to get. But I actually see like the younger generations are not fearful of the format. They actually think, oh, that's cool, which is a great start. And plus 35s, they are initially cautious, but they only have to try a good one. And at the end of the day, if a winemaker puts a good wine into a can, it will pour out a good wine, and it's as simple as that. And it really where the cans really hit the forte is portion control. Like literally,
Yep.
it's the world's increasing in single dwellings, and also you know, that 750 ml. If you're just drinking a glass a night, which is kind of you know, it's kind of it's what I like to do. It's always difficult if you're on your own and you have to open a 750 ml bottle, and I mean, you then have to go to all sorts of whiz bang tools of, you know, argons or coravins or but the wine never lasts as well, and so you have a fresher product, and also it's sort of like the downstream also is garbage. I mean, in Canada, in Toronto, we initially saw ourselves as an off-premise product, but now a lot of the bars and patios actually, because of garbage, quick to chill, so they're saving electricity in chilling the cans. And then the whole recycled scheme, which is great because it just pulls in the consumer buy-in to go to the trouble of sorting and putting those cans back. But it you know, those costings of those recycle programs, if they're done correctly and they're done well, really work in that you know, that cyclic economy. And especially when you look at Germany, you know, they're talking like, soon as that can hits the bin, it could be turned into an aeroplane wing in 3 months' time. You know, it's really good.
I think I just want to add one thing here, Chris. Also, what we've seen post-COVID is that that demand for single serves is certainly getting bigger because it cuts out the handling of by the glass. Oops.
Yeah.
So that's happening.
Yeah, it's funny. I have some questions for all you all at the end of what's going to change with the pandemic. So yeah, we're definitely seeing some change in consumption and the way people are doing things, the way they're serving. So that's really interesting also because, Chris, when you look at the millennials, I've been studying quite a bit what the millennials are you know, the trend, and they're drinking less. And the environment is really at the heart of their values. So I think the single serving in smaller format is really, they're really embracing that.
And I really love, I guess this is the other thing, is that I think our industry really needs to start changing their language to the younger generations, and the language important at the moment is, you know, how good we are at our water footprint, how, you know, unfortunately, I think it's been you know, the diversity and wonder of our industry. We're all trying to do perfection in our own little way, and we're all selling our perfection in our own little way. And it's actually what Karen was saying. What we preach actually starts being used against us. And I think a lot of the wine industry should have a look at what's happening in the spirit sector at the moment. Their marketing is very much driven to fresh, clean, pure, low carbs, like they are presenting themselves as the fix for the future. And yet we're the ones that actually are caring for the environment. We're the ones that are also microeconomies, where our industry employs people to care after vineyards and land, and where the other beverage sectors aren't so much doing that, and it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And I think that there's this wine is the best alcohol for the planet. If you're going to drink alcohol, we are the number one. If you want to care for the environment and you want to enjoy a drink at the end of the night, we actually are the best, because we're the most open, transparent, and our whole DNA is about caring for the land. Where you're not seeing you're not seeing that in the spirit category. And if you just compare, like just a simple statement like 1% of spirit versus 1% of a wine, that spirit, just by measuring the distillation costs, carbon costs, is 35 times the footprint. Now, to me, that is a massive point of difference between our industries, and yet it's not known. How is that spirit made? Where's it made? What spray programs? There's no such thing as free carbohydrates. They're made somehow, and a lot of spirits, the ethanol comes in a drum. From where?
And you're right, and I think that the wine industry has so much going for it, and we need to find, I think, better way to communicate to younger generation, because they're the one that are going to be drinking next or drinking now. And I've been reading a lot of research, and if the product doesn't focus on environment or doesn't have a part of the environment, they won't buy it. So I think as the industry, when we're committing to be respectful of the environment, we have to find better ways to communicate to them, because it will be a major buying decision for them, which is a perfect transition to go to Alice Rule from 362. I was so impressed by, we're talking in the wine industry, we're talking about tradition. Usually wine producer establish themselves, and after a few years down the road, they will say, okay, environment should be part of what I do beyond sustainability, and I will look at carbon emissions. You started your project, I believe you were 25, and right from the get-go, you had the environment. It was really important to you, not only to be sustainable, but also to find ways to offset your carbon emission. And I think it's great to have you on board to talk about that, because there's always this, I think, idea that if you're a not bigger producer, to offset your carbon emission is quite challenging and quite difficult, yet it is a big part of your mission. So can you talk a little bit about what you've been doing because you have a lot of creative ideas to get there?
Yeah, so I guess sustainability and going carbon neutral has been a North Star of mine since a little girl. I remember fresh out of university, we graduated, and the message at Lincoln University was loud and clear, that we need to feed the world, and we needed to do it with a low carbon footprint. We need to tread lightly. And I guess that's something that I've taken quite seriously since leaving Lincoln. And it all started actually at Te Mare. We're out there, we're sewing up the nets, and I thought, come on, like there's got to be a better way. The carbon footprint of just putting nets on, and then what are we going to do with the nets after they, after we've harvested our fruit? They're all broken and they need to be recycled, and how are they being recycled? So I set up a drone research to scare birds with drones, and we got some pretty epic success. But the innovation was not too well received by the older people in the industry. So I guess I went out on my own to kind of deploy all of the sustainability things that I really wanted to do. So I founded 362 very much with the mission of sustainable excellence. Everything right from day one has been considered, how can we reduce our footprint? Now, I was in the middle of a huge glass circular economy research project at Lincoln. Swore in my life I would never go back to university, but I don't know, something happened and I did. And I met some guys doing some carbon offsets. So I always fly with the Air New Zealand. I always offset my carbon footprint because it makes me feel good as a consumer. And I realized the guys that set up that technology for Air New Zealand were going out on their own. So I got in touch with them. And I said, hey, listen, I want to, I want to help. How can I help? I want to bring this into the New Zealand wine industry. I want to go carbon neutral, but I think it's very important that we bring our customers in on the journey, because quite often, from my experience in the industry, the producers, the winemakers, the viticulturists, we wear sustainability on our sleeves every single day, but we're not telling that story to our customers. How can we bring them in on the journey so they feel like they're paying, a part in the sustainability journey too? And they're like, oh yeah. And so they kept in touch. And sure enough, earlier this year, they went beta trial. And I was like, me, I want to be the first, how can I help? And they allowed me to be the first wine producer in New Zealand to help offset their carbon footprint. And it all happened in a mega hurry because it was just before harvest and I had to rebuild my entire website so it fit with the API, and there were a few technical challenges. And then COVID happened. But I guess it was quite lucky in the respect of things that most of my customers appreciate it. Over 90% of all of my online orders now offset their carbon footprint, and they love it. And a lot of work needs to go into why they choose to do it. And, there's some really amazing advancements going on with Carbon Click to offset their carbon footprint, and offering full transparency of where those carbon credits go and how and how they are being spent, and the reforestation, all those sort of things. So I think it's a pretty exciting journey to be on, and I'm pretty grateful to be my own producer now and have control over deploying some pretty cool sustainability initiatives.
So Alice, when people go to your website, they let's say they buy online, because we've seen a lot of online purchase with the COVID. Then they can add the Carbon Click, which is how much do they have to pay if they want to add this on?
$2. But I can make it as high. So for me, I'm just asking the customer to cover the transportation from point A to point B. Okay. And I think that is an awesome catalyst for them. They've paid that $2 offset, but it's also making them more mindful, what I've discovered, on what am I going to do with the end of life of this bottle. You're going to think twice about, chucking in the rubbish bin. You're going to want to recycle this. And then that fits into my North Star of going into the circular economy, making sure that glass goes back into the furnace and we, like, the circular economy of glass is functioning so well here in New Zealand. It makes me so proud that 67% on average recycled glass is what makes up a New Zealand made wine bottle here in New Zealand. The other thing that a conversation or narrative that doesn't exist but should, is that most of New Zealand's electricity and power is renewable. So you're not competing with foreign coal-fired furnaces and manufacturing plant. It happens here in New Zealand. And I think that tells another amazing story from a packaging perspective.
I think it's great, and I think it's to have those numbers when you say that 90% of your consumer actually go for it. I often hear in the industry, well, I want to make some changes, but at the end the consumer will pay for it and they're not willing to do so. Well, in fact, they are, because you're just, you're seeing it when people are going for the Carbon Click, and they are deciding 90% is quite a big percentage. So I think think it's really interesting. I have a question for all of you. There's a lot of, we're seeing with the pandemic right now, with the COVID, wine producing region, there's a lot of talk. I know it's this in Canada, but I know it's the same in the United States. The locals we're encouraged to buy local product because it's really helping the local economy, but it's also good for the carbon footprint. How do you see the wine industry forward for New Zealand? Because we do know that you're far away from everywhere, and transportation is still quite a bit of the carbon footprint. Do you see that producers should seek more to focus more on selling at home? How do you see the future of the wine industry in regards to climate change and transportation?
Who wants to go first?
You go, Karen.
I've got a few things. Like, I think we should be leading the way in research. I believe that New Zealand has an opportunity, particularly in the wine industry, given that 98% of our wine industry belongs to SWINs, that we can go carbon neutral faster than anyone. But the bottom line is that the Paris Agreement is not kind to us wine producers. It doesn't take into any of our carbon sequestration from a production perspective. The science is there that vines have a higher carbon sequestration rate than a pine tree. They don't get counted. Soil, major carbon sequestration happens in our soil, does not get counted. In our cover crops, they don't get counted. So my belief is that New Zealand wine growers should be and Brigado should be focused on carbon sequestration in our own vineyards, and lead that change and make those credits count, because at the moment it's not an equal playing field.
If I just build on what Alice said, I think New Zealand can really lead the way and is leading the way on the sustainability of our product, and I guess the thing is the quality as well. So when consumers go to buy our product, they're buying it because they enjoy it, and so it's about quality and it's about sustainability. And I think picking up on a few points that Alice said, we have got one of the highest rates of recycled glass in the world, which means that our bottles are better, although perhaps not as good as cans. And we do have a high level of renewable electricity. So when the product comes to the consumer, it is coming from a very good base level. In terms of transport, well, there's two aspects in terms of concerns around the footprint when it reaches consumers in Canada. So shipping is a relatively efficient way. So we've moved locally, we've actually moved our freight around New Zealand, we've moved it from road to rail, and where we can to domestic shipping, and that's made a huge impact on our carbon emissions. Shipping is actually, so that shows shipping is actually relatively efficient. And the New Zealand government has actually signed up in the last year to the new international maritime regulations, which is all about reducing shipping and emissions. There's a lot of opportunity there, so that shipping can become even more efficient. And then the last point I would make is that I think Chris said something. He said that cans have a place, and absolutely they do have a place. The way I see packaging happening in the future is that there are lots of different packaging options being explored. We actually launched some research with Air New Zealand last year on packaging options, because we are aware of we're very aware of the benefits of glass in terms of the way it maintains the quality of the product, but we're also aware of the weight of it when it's transported and the whole of life cycle of it. So we looked into it, and there are some really exciting packaging options coming up on the horizon that might be competing with Chris's cans. Plastic is definitely not one that we wanted to pursue for the same reasons that Chris mentioned, but there are some other exciting innovations. Bulk wine as well, although COVID may have put a stop to that in terms of the social aspects the same. But I think the thing is we need to keep on challenging ourselves on that packaging and making sure that it is as good as it can be. And I think if that's the case, then I think that actually buying New Zealand wines overseas, there is a good argument for actually the footprint of it and the sustainability aspect of it is definitely something that the consumers can feel comfortable with.
Well, Karen, I absolutely agree. I think, I'm really excited. I think our industry has been a little bit lazy on the packaging end. Like, we've excelled in all the other componentry, and it's now this end. And I also think like I was quite fearful of the local, buy local, but I think, we have to get back to the essence of wine, and wine is an expression of place and culture and time. And if you're truly a wine drinker, you want to, it's the one opportunity you've got to sit in your lounge room and be transported to Bordeaux, to Oregon, to New Zealand, and all the things that go with that. And I think, I think the world would be missing out if it all just started to drink at home. I think, we've got such a great little, our isolation gives us such strength as well, that people want to sort of know who we are and what we are. And I think our wine industry displays us quite well.
I think just lastly, probably two things from that. I think what Alice, said is one of the things that we really need to do better ourselves is to tell our sustainability story a lot better and define it a lot more tightly. This is what, sustainability as per SWINS, but look at our carbon footprint. That's one thing. Most of our wine still goes into bottles. And recently I went through an exercise of wanting to change to a lighter shape, a lighter weight bottle, and got quite a bit of pushback. So it's that question of, and Michelle, I think you did some work in that. Will the consumer pay more for a lighter bottle if a stompingly good wine is in a traditional Burgundy in a lightweight bottle?
Yes, actually, I can do a little bracket on this. Yes, they would actually. I was reading some market research. They've done some research on consumers, and they found that what actually matters the most is more the shape than the weight of the bottle. So it's a bit of a misconception that if it's lighter, they won't buy it. It's often more related to the shape than the weight. The research I've read anyway.
That's interesting.
What about, are they prepared to pay the perception around a lightweight bottle, isn't it? That's out there at the moment, because especially in North America, they like a really heavy bottle, and it's almost a sign of quality.
I think
how prepared to pay, say a bottle of one of Alice's Chardonnays, and it comes in a really lightweight bottle, but it's a really good quality wine. Are they still prepared to pay that $50 for that same Chardonnay that comes in a light bottle versus one of the local Californians that come in a bottle that weighs about 1 kilogram?
I think you have a good point, Erica, because I do think that the millennials or the younger generation are more inclined to look at a lighter weight and not really care for it. Where I think the consumer or purchasing often the $50 or $60 bottle of wine might be an older generation that still have tradition in mind. I think it still comes down to communication. How do we communicate to consumer that this is better for the environment? And I think when I talk to producers like you have the environment at heart and do things to change things, there's a gap missing between what you're doing and how to communicate to consumer. And I think that's what we need to solve. When I did the climate change conference in November in Montreal, in the room I had agents, sommeliers, wine producers, and I think that was one of the big things is consumer who were there said, I want to buy a bottle that is better for the environment. I just don't know where to start. And is the label saying organic is helpful? They don't know. So I think we still need to find a way to better communicate to consumer, especially the older generation that might be stuck in tradition, like you're saying, Erica. Is that $50 bottle of wine still good, even though it's a lightweight? I think we need to find a way to communicate that. I think we're missing an opportunity there. Yeah.
I think if any market can do it, it's Canada, because I mean, the Canadian government could just say, well, we're doing this for climate change. These are the rules. I mean, we all obey the rules coming to Canada.
Well, it's interesting you saying that, because, and I'm reading some comments as we're talking, because there's some questions there. Lots of people are commenting right now on bag in the box. I don't know if you've been following what's been happening since COVID, but we found that all over the world, the sales of bag in the box have gone up, and they're saying because people don't have to go often to the liquor store, right? They were in self-isolation, so they would have a bag in the box and then just have it for quite a long time, and they would save trips. But the researchers were saying they foresee this trend staying after the COVID is gone, because people would have gone used to it. So it's saving the carbon footprint of driving back and forth. It's also bag in the box as a lesser carbon footprint with the carbon emission. And again, maybe that is one of the areas showing that the consumer is perhaps willing to try something else than bottles, or move away from heavyweight bottles. I'm just reading other questions there. Yeah, and SAQ, that's a really good point. And Pierre Poirier is saying in Canada, in Ontario, and also in Quebec, the monopoly has been pushing for lightweight bottles. So now I believe if it's below $16 and you're a listed product, you need to be, your bottle needs to be 410 gram or lower, otherwise you won't get a listing. So definitely in the Quebec and the Ontario market, to your point, Chris, we're open, and there's a lot of people, so producers are going to have to get on board, because if you want to get listed and your price point is on that, then you won't. So I think it's showing, and if you go to the website in Ontario and Quebec, there's a place on the website telling consumer what they're doing, and they're talking about lightweight bottles. So again, that's all in the communication. And Erica, also to your point, I've been fascinated by, I don't know if some of you export to Sweden. Do you guys export to Sweden, any of you? Yeah. If you go onto the website of Systembolaget, which is the monopoly, there's no monopoly in the world who's so ahead of the game when it comes to sustainability. Go on it. You will have hours of readings. And it's amazing what they've done in the stores to put forward packaging that are better for the environment. And also they have designed their own labels that they put on bottles to tell consumer that this is a choice that is friendly for the environment. And they're making, if you want to export, they're making this a priority. So producers, I've talked to producers who've changed the packaging just for Sweden because they won't get a listing otherwise. So I think it's coming. I think in areas where we have monopoly, I think they have to educate consumer. I think sommelier needs to educate consumer. I think wine educator, agents, and all of the agents listening right now, I think that we all have to help the producer to communicate this message, because at the end of the day, we are the people in front of the consumer. So we need to do our part to help you. If you're making that decision, we need to help you tell that message, tell that story.
I think the bag and box, it's sort of from a winemaker's perspective, we just it is a product that you'll never put your great wine in, because it will fall apart. Like the oxygen permeation and flavor scalping that plastic does is always, it's always relegated that bag and box to higher production, cost cheap, industry, which there's a place for that. But for us, it's always, we need packaging, and we need technology to deliver something that puts our product in the best possible place, and for ageability.
I also think that bag in the box, though, is not meant for the wine you want to put in your cellar, and we all agree on that. But knowing that 99% of the wine that are purchased are sold within the first 24 hours, I think those wines below $20 that are drunk right away, bag in the box can last on the shelf for 18 months. Why not?
Whoa. not 18 months.
We don't agree on that.
I'd go more to 6.
Oh,
and,
okay.
and to do that you need high sulfurs. You basically the winemaker has to put the sulfur so high because it just plummets as soon as it's in. So you're trying to give it as much shelf life as you possibly can, or they'll come back to you.
So I think it's a good way. We're going to open some more questions from people listening, but I just want to applaud what all of you are doing. I think it's great. It's so inspiring. After talking to each of you, I was immersed in my books and research even more, because it's when I meet people like you that gives me the strength to continue on telling that message. And I think that we all have to work together to find solutions. And I do think at the end we have to find ways to communicate to consumer, whether you're doing aluminum can or carbon click or looking, whatever you're doing, like Karen said, you need to start somewhere. So I think as soon as you start moving a step forward, it's already a very good thing. And I think we only can get there together by having discussion like this and by talking together. Are there any questions from people who've been listening the entire hour? Some of you have already asked questions. You can turn on your microphone if you want. Be quiet. I just want to, so before I end, I just want to say also the webinar is being recorded. People who are listening, if you go to all of those websites, you'll find a lot of information about what they're doing. You can read more. We only had so little time, 1 hour is not enough. So please go to the website of those for producer. You can learn a lot. Those who've come to my conference who you were not there, if you go to tastingclimatechange.com, there's a lot of videos there also to look at what can be done. And this webinar will be shared also on my newsletter of Tasting Climate Change, in addition to be shared with the A3 Québec. And also I know that Melissa and Andrea will be sharing also the webinar with everyone. So I just want to thank again New Zealand wine growers. I want to thank A3 Québec, and also most importantly the 4 of you woke up early this morning to be with us. We're waiting for the apéro, but you're just starting your day. So thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
No problem. I enjoyed it.
Melissa, do you want to say something maybe at the end?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I find this so interesting and so proud to represent the country who has done so much already and who is so progressive in terms of both sustainability and climate change. So it's been a pleasure to hear your stories, and I think it's really interesting that everyone has something so different to discuss, and really appreciate you taking the time to speak to the Canadian market, and look forward to sharing this webinar with many people in the Canadian market and abroad. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you either in Canada or New Zealand when we can all, meet again.
Thank you.
Thank you
So much.
Bye.